Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
In 1973, my parents were all excited about building a little ranch house out in the country. They had saved up enough money and the small bank in town had approved their mortgage. Everything seemed perfect, at least at the beginning. The bank had signed a contract with a guy named Bob, who was supposed to build a house for us. But as it turns out, Bob was a bit of a mess. He was taking on too many projects all over town and leaving his clueless workers to do most of the work. At first, the build seemed to be going okay, but then things started to go wrong. It wasn't just small stuff like the wrong color of paint or crooked trim, it was much worse. The architect made a mistake on the blueprints, and the framers built a wall right through the bathtub. Can you believe that? A wall through the bathtub. My mom was told not to put anything heavy in the kitchen cabinets because they were attached to the drywall with just a few roofing nails. And the garage door opening was framed into the living room instead of facing the driveway. It was a total disaster. Finally, the day for the bank's final inspection came, and my parents met the bank's representative in the front yard. They couldn't believe the mess Bob had made. The bank guy seemed angry, probably because they had already paid Bob a lot of money. He stomped over to the front door and yanked on the doorknob. You won't believe what happened next. The whole door, including the frame, fell on him. It turned out it had just been wedged in place, not even nailed properly. The bank called Bob and he finally showed up to oversee the work himself. The problem was, Bob wasn't any better at building a house than his workers were. My parents refused to sign off on the house, and they were right to do so. My mom was a stay-at-home mom back then, stuck in a terrible rental with my two tiny siblings, while my dad was working 2 jobs. This whole house building mess was taking a toll on them. The bank and Bob treated them horribly, bullying my mom and lying to my dad. What should have been an exciting time for my parents was ruined. My mom cried a lot and my dad got really depressed. The bank eventually threatened to foreclose on us, and Bob threatened to sue my parents for breaching of contract because the bank refused to give him any more money. It was a nightmare. So my exhausted parents decided to go to an attorney named Tom. They gave him all the details about the plumbing, electrical, and tiling issues. The whole mess. They were scared because all they had was their small down payment savings. If this turned into a long court battle, the bank and Bob would probably win. Tom the attorney was kind, but my dad could tell from his expressions that things looked pretty bad. Then out of nowhere, Tom smiled and said, "Let's get everyone together for a meeting tomorrow." So the next day, my parents, Tom, the bank representative, the bank attorney, Bob, and Bob's attorney all gathered at the bank. Tom didn't waste any time. He said, "Well, my clients have decided that they no longer want this house. Please remove it." Everyone else burst out laughing. "Remove it? Are you crazy?" Then Tom dramatically placed the deed on a table and said, "My clients own the land the house is sitting on outright. They no longer want the house. Get the house off my client's land." Bob's attorney stared at the deed, then turned to Bob and said, "You built a house on a land you don't own?" Bob nodded, looking sheepish. The bank's attorney started yelling at the bank's representative. "You didn't finance the land the house is on?" The representative stammered. No," Tom said firmly. "As I said, gentlemen, you're trespassing on my client's land. I expect the house to be removed and the land returned to its original state at once." I heard from my dad that the blank looks everyone on the other side of the table passed to one another were priceless. The bank could foreclose, but on a house that wouldn't exist by the end of the week, with no way to recoup the money. They didn't even own the land it was on. Bob was at the 50% he paid out of pocket, plus he was on the hook for tearing down the house and removing it. On top of that, the bank would undoubtedly want him to repay the initial 50% they had given him. Could they have gone after my parents? Sure. A foreclosure would have meant back credit for my parents moving forward. They might lose their down payment, but to sign off on a house in its condition at that time would have meant thousands and thousands of dollars in cash to replace / repair everything from the roof to the basement before the house could be safely lived in. The bank knew my parents didn't have that kind of money. They are the ones who approved the mortgage. Not only my parents were good people and it was all such a misunderstanding. The bank and Bob couldn't do enough for them. The house was brought in line with the original blueprints and specifications immediately, at no extra cost to my parents, but at considerate cost to Bob. My parents signed the mortgage, Bob got the rest of his money, and just about broke even on the build. And the bank's representative, well, he was fired. Tom, the attorney extraordinaire, got a story of triumph to tell to fellow attorneys for the rest of his life. It was a victory for my parents, and it was like a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. Looking back on it now, it's hard to believe all the crazy things that happened. That house was a mess, and Bob was a disaster as a builder. But in the end, it all worked out, thanks to Attorney Tom and a deed that nobody saw coming. It just goes to show that even in the most frustrating and challenging situations, there can be a way out if you have the right people on your side. Moving into our new house was a dream come true for our family. My husband, James, and I had finally found a perfect home for our 3 children, Emily, Jake, and Lily. It had a spacious yard, a beautiful pool, and a friendly neighborhood. The kids were over the moon with excitement, and so were we. The first few weeks in our new home were pure bliss. The children spent hours splashing around in the pool, with their laughter filling the backyard. It felt like we were living in a paradise of our own making. One afternoon, though, I was inside preparing lunch when I heard screams coming from outside. Panic gripped my heart as I rushed to the back door. The sight that greeted me was a nightmare. My children were surrounded by 4 other kids, all older and bigger than mine, and they were pulling Emily's hair and pushing Jake and Lily around in the pool. My motherly instincts kicked into high gear, and I stormed outside. "Hey, what do you think you're doing? Get away from my children!" I yelled. The ringleader of the intruders, a girl who couldn't have been older than 14, turned to me with a sneer. "We just wanted to swim in your stupid pool, lady. Your kids are no fun." I couldn't believe the audacity of these kids. You can't just come into someone else's property without permission. Now get out of here before I call the police. As if on cue, their mother, a woman with the unmistakable aura of entitlement, marched over. Her hair was styled perfectly and her sunglasses sat perched on her nose, despite the fact that it was nowhere near sunny enough to warm them. "What's going on here?" she asked. "These kids broke into our yard and are attacking my children," I replied. The Karen, that's what I would later call her, scoffed. "My kids just wanted to have a little fun. Your brats should learn to share." I couldn't believe my ears. "Share? This is our private property. You have no right to be here." She smirked and then turned to her children. "Go on, teach these spoiled brats a lesson." Before I could even react, her 4 kids began attacking mine. Emily, Jake, and Lily were outnumbered and terrified. I was desperate to protect them, but I didn't know what to do. I screamed for James, who was inside the house, to come quickly. He burst out the door, a look of rage on his face. In his hands, he held our shotgun. The sight of the weapon sent shivers down my spine. "Get down on your knees, now!" James shouted, aiming the shotgun directly at Karen. She paled and sank to her knees, her arrogant facade crumbling. "You can't threaten me like this!" James's voice was ice cold. "You came into our property and allowed your thugs to attack our kids. You're lucky I'm not doing more than threatening." He demanded her children sit down next to her, and they obeyed. We waited for the police, and the whole neighborhood seemed to have gathered to watch the commotion. When the police arrived, we explained what had happened, and our security cameras provided undeniable evidence of Karen and her kids' behavior. The neighbors who had witnessed the altercation also corroborated our story. The officers arrested Karen and her unruly children, who were now crying and begging. We watched as they were taken away in handcuffs. In the following days, we made sure to reinforce the boundaries of our property and installed additional security measures. We hoped that our family could finally enjoy our new home in peace, free from the entitled behavior of others. But the incident left us shaken, and it took some time for the kids to recover from the trauma. We used it as an opportunity to teach them about boundaries and respect for others' property. As for Karen, she was charged with trespassing, child endangerment, and assault. Her children were placed in the custody of other family members, and it was a harsh lesson for all of them. Our neighborhood came together in support of our family, and we felt grateful for the sense of community that had formed. 2 weeks ago, my wife and I, both in our 20s, had just recently celebrated our wedding. It was a lovely day full of joy, love, and commitment to the future. We wanted our reception to be a happy occasion where we could celebrate starting a new life together with our friends and family. I had no idea that it would also serve as a scene of a memorable confrontation with spoiled relatives. Everything was going according to plan until the bouquet toss was about to begin. As is customary, my wife threw her bouquet into the air while beaming with joy. Unexpectedly, her cousin Rachel, a vibrant 24-year-old, leapt and grasped it while grinning eagerly. None of us were expecting what happened next. Ross, Rachel's 25-year-old boyfriend, observed Rachel take the bouquet as a sign from the heavens. Ross had reportedly been carrying an engagement ring around for an unknown amount of time. He dashed onto the dance floor, got down on one knee, and made the traditional romantic gesture of giving her a ring. All eyes were immediately focused on them once she replied yes. It appeared as though Ross and Rachel's engagement party had taken the place of our wedding. Even though it was obvious I didn't like the exhilaration, our photographer had restricted hours, and we were on a strict time constraint. Despite my worries that this unanticipated turn would interfere with our plans, I was most troubled by my wife's obvious suffering. My wife does not enjoy being in the spotlight or spending excessive amounts of money on herself. Her one particular day to shine without feeling guilty was supposed to be our wedding day. It was heartbreaking to see it overshadowed by Ross and Rachel's unexpected engagement. I couldn't watch as our day was ruined in front of us. I therefore decided to make the painful decision to ask Ross and Rachel to leave with the approval of my wife. I located Ross, approached them, and patiently presented my viewpoint. Ross's proposal took the spotlight away from my wife and me on our wedding day, which was supposed to be about us. I told Ross that I didn't like how he stole the show, and we'd like it if you and Rachel could leave early for the rest of the night. I didn't think Ross would like it. He said back right away, "Man, you're acting crazy. It was just a thought. Why is everyone so upset?" A few people at our wedding overheard us talking and chimed in with their own thoughts, which quickly made things more tense. I didn't think it would turn out to be so dramatic, but it did. Ross and Rachel chose to leave in the end, but the damage was already done. Our friends couldn't stop talking about Ross and Rachel getting engaged and why I asked them to leave for the rest of the night. Even though most people were on our side, the talk had moved away from our wedding and toward the show that had just happened. My wife and I were both angry and upset, and we didn't want to be constantly reminded of Ross and Rachel's last-minute proposal. Instead, we wanted a night to celebrate our love with our loved ones. Over the next few days, my wife and I had a few fights during our talks. She thought we had made the rushed choice and that we should have acted happy for Ross and Rachel at the time to keep the evening from getting worse. I was still sure that Ross and Rachel, and Ross in particular, were the real bad guys in the situation. Rachel's mother, who's also my wife's aunt, told her that she didn't agree with our choice. She thought that we should have handled it better and talked about our problems in private instead of letting a small mistake turn into a fight. She said that at this point, Ross and Rachel's proposal would be more memorable than our wedding because of all the drama surrounding it. Had I judged too quickly? Was there any way to handle the situation that would have worked better? I couldn't help but wonder if I was, in fact, the bad guy in our own love story. As the days and weeks went by, family fights got worse. My wife and I decided to meet with Ross and Rachel to talk about what was going on and try to mend the broken ties. We wanted to clear things up, so we asked them to come to our house. I told them, "Look, Ross, Rachel, we wanted to talk about what happened at the wedding." As I sat across from them in our living room. "We knew you were happy about getting engaged, but we felt like it took away from our special day. We had to ask you to leave, which was hard, but we wanted our love and commitment to be remembered at our wedding." Rachel said, "We never meant to steal your show or make you feel bad. Even though it was just a spur of the moment thing, it was exciting. Even though I still think you went overboard, Ross said, I understand where you're coming from. I probably should have thought about it more. My wife said with seriousness, we just want to get over this and not let it make our relationship worse. We talked about how Ross and Rachel had no plans to hurt anyone. They were really sorry that their quick idea had made us feel bad. We decided to leave the past behind and put the family's connection first. We all learned something from it in the end. We learned that feelings can sometimes cloud our judgment when we're under a lot of stress. It also helped us understand how important it is to solve family problems and talk to each other. The chaos stopped after a few months. For us and Rachel's problem was their engagement no longer ruled our wedding day. Instead, it became a prized memory of the love, happiness, and peace we had with our loved ones. Ross and Rachel, on the other hand, got married in the end in a beautiful wedding of their own. And now some comments on the post. Someone saying, "You're not the jerk. I can see being caught up in the moment, Ross. However, he was carrying around the ring at your wedding, so he had already thought about proposing to Rachel at your wedding. That was a jerk move on his part. I don't blame you for kicking them out, even though it ended up being more of a talking point. Had Ross not been a jerk and argued with you and just realized his error in judgment, and he and Rachel quietly left, then there would have been no scene, and you and your new wife could have then enjoyed your day the way you should have been able to. I don't agree with a poster who said that you should go to their wedding and upstage them, because that wouldn't just cement in everyone's minds that you two were the jerks from the start. However, what I would do is, if you are invited to their wedding, which you might not be, as they might worry that you will retaliate, I would stand up and give a sincere congratulation and then say something like, don't worry, we have no intention of upstaging you two on your big day. This day is for you, and then leave it at that. It makes you the bigger person, but reminds them what they did, because I wouldn't put it past them to announce their pregnancy on someone else's big day." Another commenter adds, "Not the jerk, but make it up to them. Get invited to their wedding, then announce your wife's pregnancy there in similar fashion." A third commenter goes with, "Not the jerk. It was your wedding day, so Ross choosing that point in time to propose was a slime ball move, especially if he didn't discuss doing so prior to you and your wife's big day. Sign or not, there was no reason for Ross to think that was the appropriate time to do that, especially since he's been walking around with a ring anyway."
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.